All right. Welcome back to the Minivan Movie Clubbers. As you can see, we are not in the minivan today.
Nope.
We just got done watching the NFL draft, and that was a fun experience. Now we get to talk about the thing that we find even more fun, which is talking to you about the movies. This past week, we actually had a really fun week where we got to relive our junior high days and sneak away and do a double feature.
Yep. Luckily, our wives were very gracious and let us skip out right after dinner. So
very early, and unlike our junior high selves that would sneak into movies, we actually pre-purchased our tickets to both movies the night before.
You paid for those?
I did. Knock on wood. But it was a great week for movies. We got a good show. We want to talk about the two movies that we saw, Renfield and Air. And we also want to talk a little bit about some of the movies we've already reviewed in the past, talk about some ideas we have for the future, and there's a couple big movies coming up. So in the past, what we've done is we've really focused in on a single feature or a single topic. Today, we want to kind of have a little bit of a road trip grab bag show. So grab some snacks, and let's go on a road trip.
Yep. Buckle up.
Perfect. So as a reminder to anybody that's tuning into this live stream right now, remember, we are doing a movie on the mini promotion to get to 100 subscribers. Right now, we're currently at 39 subscribers, and we've only been doing this for 30 days. So for us, that feels like a huge win. So if you want to see a double feature, we went to Cinemark, which on Tuesday nights has $5 tickets. So Tuesday night, $5 tickets. The two of us were able to see two movies for less than $20. It was an awesome experience, and we're giving away a $25 Fandango gift card to anybody that signs up to be one of our first 100 subscribers. We're going to do a drawing out of that 100 names, and you're going to be entered to win a $25 gift card to Fandango, which you can take and go see a movie on the mini. So make sure you go to our YouTube page, like, subscribe, all the YouTube jargon, subscribe to our channel, and you'll be put into that drawing.
Yep, it's that easy. Don't be 101. Be within that top 100 and get a good deal. The odds will never be better for you to win something as exciting as a movie on the mini.
Yep, so let's get into the big part of the show. So last week, we spent some time talking about The Last Kingdom, specifically the culmination of the series in the movie Seven Kings Must Die, the conclusion of Uhtred. And we got some good feedback. We really liked hearing a little more of the streaming stuff. And this is probably the first movie that we reviewed that was had some actual good source material. Yeah. It wasn't just a Netflix movie made just for Netflix to be kind of the bane of streaming existence. There's a huge 13-novel series. There's 5 seasons of material on TV and this movie. Have you had any closing thoughts since our last episode that you want to kind of touch base with?
For me, I think it was a good conclusion to Uhtred's story with Alexander Draymond. I think there's always that possibility out in the ethos that the perfect storm comes together and they get enough money and they make another movie potentially. But I do think that it was a welcome wrap up for Uhtred's story. What about you?
So shameless plug here, on our YouTube channel, we have the shorts, and there's a short that shows our kind of closing conversation of the Valhalla scene, the highly debated ending of Seven Kings Must Die, the epic conclusion to The Last Kingdom, where Uhtred is sitting in between his two fates of Valhalla or his family and what that all looks like. And there's so many people on Twitter, on Instagram, all over the cosmos of the interwebs and the internets that are like, he went to Valhalla. And I even said in our short, I think he went to Valhalla. But I kind of thought about it a little bit more, and I did some research. And by research, I mean I did a Google search. Yeah. Which means I'm an expert now.
Yes.
I have a PhD in this topic by doing one search. And it turns out that to be entered into Valhalla, it is a misconception that you have to hold your sword. It is also a misconception of all these different things that the only thing you need to do, there's only 2 things you need to do to be welcomed into Valhalla. That is from the actual mythology of their Norse religion, is 1, you have to die an honorable death. An honorable death is often expressed like a death in battle. And then 2nd, you have to be found righteous in the eyes of Odin. So those are the two requirements to be let into Valhalla. And I believe that Uhtred is found righteous in the eyes of Odin. However, I do not believe that he fulfills the requirement of dying in battle. Now, it could totally be like the ending is like a purgatory.
Yeah, he was already dead.
He was already dead, and this is the way that he satisfies his passing on. But he didn't die in battle. He didn't die with a sword in his hand. So I believe he is not dead. He is, in that timeline, he is still walking the earth with his son and his family, living to die another day. That's my 2 cents on it. I don't think they should go back to the movie and do another bunch of stuff and spin-offs like every other series does. But I do not think that Uhtred died. That is my fan theory. He did not die.
And those are some of the best endings. It's like Inception with the spinning wheel at the end, and is like, did it tilt a little? Is it real? It leaves it open to interpretation. Everybody gets to have their own reason why they believe a particular theory on. You have your clues. I don't think he died because of it. People will have their other clues. I think he's dead. I think what I thought from the beginning, I think it is probably the end, but it's also a very moldable end for them if they want to come back and retcon it and be like, no, he was just kind of half dead and he decided to come back to the real living world.
And I think you point out that that's the fun part about like a show like that is you can talk about it. My wife is not nearly as invested to certain shows or movies as I am, but The Last Kingdom she loved. And like I said last week, as soon as the movie was over, it's like, let's watch the whole thing all over again. Yeah. So it didn't turn anybody off. So let's talk about something that was a little bit different than The Last Kingdom. First part of our double feature this week, we went and saw Renfield.
Yep, Renfield. It is a movie about Dracula's familiar. So a familiar is the person for a vampire that is still human, that basically takes care of all their things in the daylight when they're sleeping.
Yeah. So basically, Nick is to me. Nick is my familiar. I'm a vampire.
With all of the crap that Brett needs.
I am a familiar. He is familiar with all the needs I have, like my laundry, my ego. It all needs to be catered to. Otherwise, I get very cranky and I will kill innocent children.
Yes. And so
please don't clip that.
Yes, no. We're gonna cut that out.
That's gonna be a short.
Yeah, I will kill children. I'm gonna turn it into a song. Make it a beat. So Renfield is played by Nicholas Hoult. Dracula is played by Nicolas Cage. It is an awesome pairing. If you watch the trailer, you already expect it to be over the top gore. Nicolas Cage has stated many times in his career that one of his dream roles is Dracula. His other is to play Superman, which at this point would be pretty disappointing for the audience.
Maybe the new reboot, he'll be Superman.
Well, they wanted him to go younger. That's why they got rid of Cavill. So if they bring in Nicolas Cage, I think some people would be kind of disappointed. And so half of this movie is Nicholas Hoult. He's starting to regret all the things that he's done to be Dracula's familiar, the people he's hurt, and he's trying to reconcile that with himself, while also realizing that like Dracula's kind of a terrible person to work for, and he's manipulating him, and he's going to a support group to help him deal with people in relationship with narcissists. And that is well executed. That whole plot line, the A plot of this movie is super well done. Unfortunately for this movie, there's a B plot, and that B plot involves Awkwafina as a
more like an
detective.
F plot.
Yeah,
it's just
we got to go way down the alphabet
sucks.
to get to her plot storyline, and it's a very stereotypical storyline. We've seen it a billion times. She's a police officer who's trying to avenge the death of her father, who was a police officer before her, who was killed by gang and corrupt cops. You know, it's a storyline that's been overdone a million times. She doesn't add anything new to it. The movie doesn't add anything new to the storyline. And it's a very hard movie to judge overall, just because the high of half this movie of Nicholas Hoult and Nicolas Cage, their dynamic, their dialogue, their interactions with each other, is everything that you would have hoped that it could have been when you watched the trailer. It truly is. It's almost. I don't want to say it's probably as close to perfection from those two's casting and their like story dynamic and the gore and all, the action and those things together as it could have been. and it is juxtaposed with Aquafina's storyline that brings it down so much that it just is kind of painful to watch. I made the comment to Brett after we finished, if I had seen this movie as a 15-year-old with my buddies, it might be one of our favorite like go back to movies. But for me, it's just such a conflicting movie to talk about and review.
See, there's been a lot of talk about like other trailers where you see the trailer, like I've seen the whole movie, I don't need to watch it. Here, I saw the trailer and I was like, oh, I'm okay. I want to see that goofy, over the top, ridiculous movie. And then you watch the movie and you get your fill. The over the top parts, the over the top bits, the fighting, the gore, the blood is really ridiculous and it's hilarious. Literally, they're kicking people and they're exploding like a watermelon or
ripping arms off, using them as nunchucks.
It's hilarious and that's good. Like I signed up to see that movie. I did not sign up for the F plot of seeing some dark, gritty crime thriller. And I just wish that they would have said, let's just make this an hour long. There's a sequence at the very opening of the movie where they kind of explain the history of how Renfield's character is Dracula's familiar, and they really skip through that. And there's almost this weird like meta message, a theme of psychological abuse and physical abuse, manipulation, and relationships there as they talk through this like grief group. So there's definitely a theme to be discussed there. But I wish that they would have let us experience more instead of just showing us and forcing us to accept that as the audience. I think, if I'm doing some backseat directing from the minivan, some van fiction, if you will, I would have loved to have seen them spend some time there through like different eras where we get to see Dracula woo Renfield and we get manipulated with him.
Yeah.
So we feel manipulated and then cut all of the cop stuff out. I love Ben Schwartz in this. I actually think Ben Schwartz, for the most part, is very annoying. Personally, as Sonic, he's great. And in this role, like his annoyingness is actually kind of cool. It works really, really well. But the high parts of this movie, I don't think they're good enough to save me from the low parts. There's so many parts where, for some seeming reason, they decide, like, let's give Aquafina an emotional moment to really ground this story in reality. And I'm like, this is a movie about Dracula. Yeah. I don't need it grounded in reality. You just ripped a guy's arm off and used it like a javelin and speared him through the face. Like, it's not a realistic movie. Just go full John Wick and just go nuts. Like, ham it up.
It's like she had like a few, like there was like a few ideas for her character and they just like didn't see any of them to fruition. Like the relationship with Renfield
those moments where they try to like make it real, the pace of the movie just screeches to a halt. Yeah. The humor is lost. Like they didn't even play it cheesy where some movies, we're a cheesy movie. We've got to have some emotional moments. We can't just be one big action sequence like Mad Max Fury Road. Shout out to Nicholas Hoult for also being in that movie.
Which they totally could have been just like Mad Max Fury Road. And we're just going to give you this ride. And it's like you said, to me, off of the podcast, off the stream was, if they just give us Nicholas Hoult inside the grief group and he's telling the story of him and Dracula and like you said, going through those eras, and then it cuts to the scene where Nicolas Cage comes in, which is a phenomenal scene. The movie just flows so much better, and this could have been like a classic.
The two Nicks were really good here. Yep. I usually only have positive things to say about Nicks, so that's a good thing. But I think that they could have done more with Nicolas Cage. He's not in this movie nearly enough, in my opinion. They give way too much screen time to other people that are not the reason I came to see this movie, and that's just a disappointment to me. I don't even know if I really need to spend too much time discussing this, other than to say, like, I told you this when we left the theater. I think I'll hold this comment until after we've talked about the other movie. But
so I think that
it just was I wasn't about it.
I think that it's another one of those head scratchers. I don't know why the studio decided the release window for this, why it's coming out in March and not end of September, October. It was a theatrical bomb. I mean, the movie made like $7 million in its opening weekend on a budget of $87 million. There's no way around. You're not making your money back. in this movie. So we're very unlikely to get a Dracula sequel out of this with Nicolas Cage, which they left open to interpretation by telling you that we don't really know if we killed him or not at the end of the movie. And I don't think that I would sign up for anything if they were like, we're bringing Awkwafina back anyways. So it's a movie. I don't regret that I watched it because we got it on sale on Cinemark on Tuesday for such a cheap
Not
ticket.
a sponsor, Cinemark.
Yeah.
Yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet.
Now, had we paid full price for this ticket all by itself, and it's the only movie we saw in the double feature, I would have been, I think, a little upset about that.
So we saw it with a double feature. We saw it was the first movie of the night that we saw, and it was fun. Like I actually did have several laugh out loud moments. So the high parts of this movie are very good, but the lows are just so bad. So for me, if you're watching this and you haven't watched it, there are definitely moments that deliver on what the Renfield promise is. There are so many moments that just disrespect that promise. I would not pay to see this, but if you like Dracula movies, you like vampire movies, or you like funny action films, wait till this is on streaming during like the Halloween season and watch it then. But don't spend $12 to go see this.
Yeah, if you like over the top.
We saw it on a discount night with my Cinemark movie club pass, so we got a discount on a discounted ticket. Double discount is the way to see this, or wait till it comes to some streaming platform.
Yeah, if you just love gory movies like Evil Dead style, and you have already seen the new Evil Dead, and you like want something else to watch, this is definitely worth watching. But it's how about this? Instead
of watching this, go find Dale and Tucker vs. Evil.
Yeah,
it's streaming. It's funny. It's scary, and it's good.
And it's much more of a complete story.
It is a complete story. It has all the humor and tropes that you expect from this movie, but it actually delivers on like a cohesive story without being too. And it's weird because this doesn't need a whole lot to sell itself, and they still just added a few too many plots. Just let me have the two Nicks talking to one another, spending time with one another, and the therapy group, and let that be. Have the mafia show up at the end, and it's a fun movie. Otherwise, I don't care.
Yep. So, did you want to do the review for this now, or do you want to do that?
So, what did you rank this movie?
So, for me, the high is so good, and I actually don't regret watching it. I enjoyed the movie to some degree, even though the lower parts of the movie really do drag it. I'm going to give it a 6.5.
Okay.
I think it's watchable. I don't think it's an unwatchable movie with the lows, but it definitely hinders any upside.
So me, I mentioned this from my review. I did laugh out loud at certain moments, and there are plenty of movies I have seen that I didn't laugh out loud at all. For me, this gets a 4. 4 out of 10. I think it's the worst movie we've seen this year. And it's probably the worst movie I've seen since we've been reviewing movies on the show. So that sounds like a escaping review, but it's also just a sign of, as we've been thinking about some of the criticism that we've gotten from some of our audience or the feedback that we've received, this movie just didn't speak to me in any meaningful way. Is it unwatchable? No. There's definitely redeeming moments. That said, this requires a specific audience and a specific mindset. Had this been the second movie we saw in our double feature, I think I would have been significantly more disappointed.
Yes.
So I was locked into some of the nostalgia of like, hey, I got my pizza. I'm hanging out at the movies with my buddy. It's a good time. We're going to another movie. But if that was the movie we go home on, I'm like, this is a bummer. So 4 out of 10 for me. And we've been talking about this idea. I'm curious if you're watching this now, put it in the comment section below. We've been kind of toying around the idea of, in addition to our rankings for the movies, collecting lists so that now that we've done this, our ninth episode, and we've now reviewed several movies. So we're trying to put movies together in different categories of like all-time movies. These are all-time classics that are just some of the best movies in film. Then you've got, maybe some like popcorn hits where you're like, hey, it's really rewatchable all the time. Movie purgatory, movies that are just kind of like there. They're not good. They're not bad.
Yeah, they're
they just
watchable
exist.
movies. It's not, you're not gonna like hate yourself for watching it, but it's not really gonna be your favorite movie.
And then like The Untouchables, just like crap that I would
don't.
never watch. For me, this kind of falls into that purgatory list of like it exists, and if you need time to kill, this will work. But I'm not like itching to rewatch this movie.
I think there's definitely a audience for the movie, probably a smaller one, and it really missed out on it being a much larger.
Yep, for sure.
Larger audience. So we'll move on to our second movie of the double feature, Air. I don't think that either one of us need to hide how we felt about this movie. It is, as Brett said, and I totally echo that opinion, an awesome movie that we both thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah, with Renfield is the worst movie I've seen this year. Air is probably the best movie so far of 2023. It's the most complete in the way of its composition. Really details the story of the Nike Corporation, specifically their basketball shoe sales department, going after Michael Jordan as brand ambassador. And that's literally the plot of the movie. It's a very simple story, but it's told incredibly eloquently. And I say eloquently because the dialogue is extremely strong. For a movie that's all about contracting, there's no car chase scenes.
Yeah, they don't have to ham it up with.
There's no blood. There's no action sequence. Most of the movie takes place with someone either sitting across a table, a desk, or on the phone, talking to another person on the phone. So it's a very dialogue-heavy movie, and still, they make it interesting. Yeah. The cinematography is really great, where you see so many shots that immediately put me back to the 80s. And seeing this on the big screen, I'm telling you, there are going to be plenty of people that watch this and say, like, oh, I'll wait till it goes on Amazon Prime or whatever streaming platform it's going to be on. Do yourself a favor. Go watch this in the theater, because being on that big mega screen, you're able to appreciate so much more of the attention to detail with the vehicles, some of the sweeping and panning establishing shots, which typically are just, B-roll. Here, it became part of the movie where you felt the time. And I think it's crazy to think in a movie about the NBA, about arguably the greatest athlete of all time in Michael Jordan, they're able to create this nostalgia for a different time with the cinematography and with the dialogue. And in a movie that really is all about Michael Jordan, we don't see Michael Jordan. We focus on the Nike team, and they're all very real people. They're everyday characters. So I thought this was composition cover to cover the best movie we've seen so far in 23.
And they do a phenomenal job of building the tension in this movie with a drama movie that we already know how it ends.
Yep.
We know that this ends up being $1 billion deal between Nike and Jordan, and everybody got rich off of it, and everybody that's a sneakerhead owns a pair of Jordans, and everybody probably at some point in their life has had at least one pair of Jordans in some degree, or something with the Jordan logo on it. We know the ending, and they still, with this cast, they have a great ensemble cast: Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Jason Bateman, Viola Davis, just a bunch. Chris Tucker. It was so nice to see Chris Tucker back in like a real, like, concrete, serious role, where he is some comic relief, but he's in a legitimate movie, and it's just nice to see him back in something. Just somebody from our childhood that's done so many, awesome movies that I think we can still adore.
And this ensemble, when I said like cover to cover, it really is an ensemble where you have people like Damon Wayans shows up for a very small role here. And when I think of Damon Wayans, I think of just like comedian,
scary movie type
goofy, stuff. Really over the top acting. Here he plays a very straight character, and it feels very genuine.
Yeah.
Chris Tucker, another guy who's known for a lot of his over the top, outlandish comedy, his stand up comedy. But here he kind of plays this very affable, lovable character. And while some of it is a little bit like endearing, the other parts that are very sincere, where when he's having that conversation with Matt Damon's character, Sonny Vaccaro, about like, what are we going to do? How do I do it? And he's like, well, just follow your heart. Follow that inner voice. It really feels like he's talking to you as the audience. So I think maybe an interesting conversation to have about themes, because that's kind of what we try to focus on. I think the reason I like this movie so much is because this is the first movie of the year that one was just really well done cover to cover. I think Mario was really done well, but plot wise, we talked about, there wasn't really much to take away from it. It was a nostalgia bomb for video games, but there's only so much you can say about that. This one seemed to address a couple of like themes that were interrelated, but perhaps one of the biggest ones that speaks to everybody is like, how much risk should you take in life? And what is the right way to bring people along or let them stay behind? Because you've got Sonny Vaccaro, who's Matt Damon's character, who's kind of this basketball guru who he likes to gamble. He believes in risk, but he got data to back that risk up.
Yeah.
And then you've got other people like Ben Affleck's character, Phil Knight, owner and creator of Nike, who is a little bit more of a free spirit, but he just took the company public. So he's got the boardroom that's saying, you've got to do it this way. You've got to do it this way. So in the middle of this conflict is one side saying, we need more money. We can't go after a bunch of nobody. Let's go after Michael freaking Jordan. Yep. Sure, he doesn't like our shoes, and our shoes suck, but it's Michael freaking Jordan. I believe he's going to be the best basketball player ever. I will push all my chips into the center on this guy. Let's do it. And that's a big risk, but let's do it. Whereas Phil Knight's saying, like, hey, look, I see that it's a big risk, but we also got to diversify our assets. We can't always be taking the type of risk. And I think the interesting thing is that both of them are they're right. Yep. They're both right. So the movie creates this conflict where typically we tend to think of ourselves like getting to a risky point in our life where if I go left, I'm right. If I go right, I'm wrong. You know, it's very hard one way or the other. But here, you get to see that actually both sides are incredibly valid. Yep. And it takes time and communication to wrestle through that. And you find through the movie, while Sonny and Phil are on opposing sides of this with Matt and Ben Affleck, you have the people in the middle of the conflict with like Chris Tucker, Viola Davis. Jason Bateman has this wonderful scene where his character, Rob Rob is he's like the marketing director for basketball shoes for Nike. And they're staying at the office all weekend. And he mentions that it's his birthday and he is recently divorced. He has this new custody agreement with his daughter. And he only gets to see her for 4 hours every other Sunday. And he's like, I bring her Nike shoes because she thinks it's cool. And if we don't get Michael Jordan, they're going to shut this division down. I'm going to lose my job. And you know what? I'm still going to buy the damn shoes because that's the only way that she knows me now.
That's how he's connecting. Yeah.
And it's Jason Bateman, who like also is kind of known for some like goofy comedy stuff. It really hits. Like I felt that moment. And so you see this conflict where both sides are right, but there's people in the middle of this conflict that are going to be devastatingly affected depending on the outcome. And like you said, we have the dramatic irony. We know what happened. We know the end of the story, and still they're able to hook us. So I really give a lot of credit to the writers and the cinematographers and the actors, obviously, because the drama is real. The dialogue is really heady. And there's actually some good, like, funny moments without it being, like, woke or commentating too much on political stuff. It makes fun of some, like, basketball culture and social media nowadays. So
it doesn't feel like the Marvel sin of, like, trying to force comedy into, like, your dramatic scenes. It, like, is very appropriate for the setting. And then to go back to what you were talking about with the theme of, like, risk management. And when you're on a team, you've got to think about the risks that your teammates are also taking in the situation, because Sonny, he doesn't have anybody else. He doesn't have a family at home. He's not in charge of the company. He doesn't have a big risk. If he loses his job, he's still gonna just be like watching basketball anyways. So he's much more willing to take the big risk. Whereas Jason Bateman, he asks him later on, right after the pitch or right before the pitch, how do you think this is going? And Matt Damon gives him kind of a whatever answer, and Bateman's response to him is, "You sound like a guy that doesn't have a 7-year-old on a Sunday waiting for him."
Mm-hmm.
And so you get like, you have to think about like, I know what I'm risking, and maybe it's worth it for me, but what is my team risking? Whose jobs are also going to be hung out to dry because they believe in me, and what I believe in could be the key, or it could fail. And especially if it's something so risky, like putting all your chips on Michael Jordan. And they talk about it later in the movie. What if he blows out his knee the first year, never plays again? We gave him this guaranteed contract. We lost our whole division's money. We all are going to lose our job. He's going to lose his thing. So they do a phenomenal job with the casting, with the acting, with the delivery. Timing is so good in this. As you said, the cinematography is awesome. It's exactly what you want from any sort of historical dramatized fiction, where we know generally the plot lines. They ham up some scenes, some dialogue, how interactions happened. So you'll see some of those stories come out after the movie that, it didn't really happen this way, it happened this way, but they put it together in a way that makes for a good story that people want to watch.
And I think that it's not all sunshine and roses there. There are some thorns in this rose bush, but for the most part, I think it's an exceptional movie. I want to give some credit to some of the actors, or like David Falk plays Chris Messina, the agent for Michael Jordan, and most of his scenes are him.
So his name is Chris Messina.
Oh,
he plays
David Falk. Sorry, my fault. Chris Messina plays David Falk. What the fuck, man?
What the fuck?
How'd I mess that one? I'm fucking losing my mind.
But yes, he absolutely kills that role.
You've seen that role so many times in Jerry Maguire, in sports movies, in contracting movies, and he does it in a way that is both really funny, but also very believable. On the flip side, you have someone like that. He's playing it up, super hamming it up, very loud, very flagrant with his words. Then you have someone like Viola Davis, who has just such a pedigree as an actress.
She's got gravity.
She never yells.
Mm-mm.
She doesn't have any big hand gestures. It's always very calm and collected. And if you're familiar with like The Last Dance from ESPN, it's on Netflix, check it out. If you're familiar with Michael Jordan's family, they're a very reserved family. And she plays that calm, collected, and in control so well, where when she speaks, you are listening. You are hanging on every single word. And again, it's not a super, if you take a step back, it's really not a super interesting story. It's interesting because of who Michael Jordan became. But it's, aside from that, it's really not that interesting. But the actors did such a good job, from the headliners of Matt Damon, Jason Bateman, Ben Affleck, but some of these ensemble cast members of Chris Messina, Viola Davis, Chris Tucker. Even I thought Matthew Mayer did really good with Peter Moore, the designer of Air Jordan, the shoe and the logo. It just seems very believable. None of these people felt like, oh, this is a Hollywood person pretending to walk with one of the average Joes.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot.
And then the set design, the costume design, it really reminded me a lot of American Hustle, where it's like, it's just so well done. Everybody's, on task. Everybody looks the part. So you really feel when you're watching this movie, like you're transported back to the 80s, even from the convenience store where Matt Damon gets his groceries. Everything, just, you feel like you're in that time period. And it's like a little, even though it is some of a nostalgia bomb to say like Mario, it's even better because it's in the real world and you're getting these real feelings. One knock that I do think that you had, that I did sort of agree with, was some of the soundtrack. There was a few songs that they used that were pretty stereotypical songs that we've seen in these sorts of situations in the movie. So it would have been nice to maybe hear, because it started out very strong, the soundtrack does, to hear either some of their own remixes or just a different song altogether to give it something fresh. So it's not like the biggest sin, but it is, if you're going to look at something that you want to criticize.
I told you that I was cool with the soundtrack, especially at first as like an establishing thing. We're in the 80s, I get it. But then there was the emotional moment where we're waiting to hear back, and Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time is playing, and I'm like, it kind of took me out of it. I kind of stepped back and like, oh wait, I'm not in the movie anymore. I would prefer to see them do some score, but at the same time, it's a movie in the 80s and they deliver on all the 80s movies, so or 80s movie music, so it's hard to fault them too terribly much. Would you rank the movie?
So I give this movie an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's an awesome movie, stacking it up there with some of the best ones we've reviewed so far on the show. It is definitely, like you said, the best movie that has come out in 2023 that we've watched. And we've watched several 2023 movies, and there's been some ones that I like, but none of them top to bottom, front to back, from casting, directing, production to execution, deliver on quite the exceptional level that this movie does.
Yep.
What about you?
So for me, I rank this movie an 8 out of 10. In order for when we talked about it a couple episodes ago of how we rank things, there's a couple elements of like story, directorial vision. Everything here is superb. I think it does an exceptional job. And I think one of the things that's very sneaky is I think this movie feels somewhat timeless. In that anytime you're connected to Michael Jordan, that is going to live on. There's the speech that Matt Damon gives towards the end of the movie trying to seal the deal that everyone at this table will be forgotten, but you will never be forgotten. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. Michael Jordan's myth and legend is going to outlive him, his brand, everything. So there is a timelessness to like, hey, if you like sports, if you like motivational figures, this is a Michael Jordan movie, not about Michael Jordan. Yeah. So I think there's something there. And then for me personally, literally, I don't work in shoes. I work in oil and gas, in data mining and artificial intelligence. And the next day after seeing this movie, I was talking to my coworkers about the movie. We're constantly talking about innovation and work. How do we push the envelope? How can we innovate and do something new? So the topic of risk and risk management always comes up when you're dealing with oil and gas and refineries. So it was a really fun conversation to have where I was actually able to take a movie to people that really don't give a damn about movies and have a really constructive conversation about who are we? Are we a Sonny Vaccaro who's willing to take risks without, fear of what could happen? Are we Philip Knight, who is maybe a little bit too cautious? We once were cavalier. Are we Rob, who's kind of stuck in the middle of these changes and we just have to be worker bees? I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had there. I think that there's a chance this could go up over time because there's so many lines that are said throughout the movie where I'm like, almost like I'm in church.
Yeah.
So when I rewatch this, I want to see how those lines stick and if that improves. But this is like a super solid 8. If it goes up, I could see that. I don't see it going down though.
Yeah, and another nice thing is like it's a clean movie for the most part. Besides a little bit of language, you'll be able to watch this with kids, younger than 10, I'd imagine. And like you said, there's so much about believing in who you are, believing in what your convictions are, knowing your worth. Just a lot of really good themes that you can.
And it's not just like foo-foo, like take risks, believe in yourself, haha. It really is like it really is kind of figuring out how do you do that and how do you surround yourself with people that you can actually talk to, that can give you constructive criticism and can call you out, hold you accountable while you're also challenging yourself. There's the old passage, Chinese proverb. There's one in the Bible, like iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another. Here you've got Philip Knight brought Sonny Vaccaro in to challenge their basketball division. Yeah. And then when he tries to do that, he's like, whoa, I don't know. I wanted you to bring in a couple people, not do this. You're really rocking the boat here. So you've got to put people in your life that are going to challenge you and change you. And this movie does a really good job of not talking about it, but being about it. Because everybody's challenging each other in different ways. And without one specific piece, it doesn't work. Yep. So it's not like, oh, Sonny is the hero of this movie or Phil is the hero. They're all working in tandem, even though at certain times they're almost at odds. So it feels very real because very rarely in life are things very, biopic or two-sided where it's like, oh, this is one side, this is the other, and it's right and wrong. It's very black and white. There's lots of gray. So I thought it was cool to see that they all work together even their pitch at the end wasn't very homogenous or very well
It wasn't
polished.
like the perfect pitch where it's like, oh, they executed that like a movie heist where everything goes off perfectly.
Yep. Things weren't perfect, and it still worked.
Yeah, and that's another really good theme of like, there's a lot of times where they're in adversarial relationships, and being okay with people giving you criticism, being okay with people not agreeing with you, and also having the humility and the wherewithal to think about what somebody else's opinion was and coming back and being like, hey, I thought about it and you were right. Like, I changed my mind. Like, you don't have to be married to one opinion and that's it forever because you thought of it and they thought of something else. They're always going to be wrong. You're always going to be right. Having that internal conviction of really thinking about what people say and taking some time to meditate on it and coming back and being like, hey, I changed my mind. That's okay. That's okay in the business world. That's okay in relationships, friendships, to be like, hey, you were right. I was wrong. And having the ability to say that will get you very far in life.
Yep. So this was probably the best movie so far of 2023. But that probably wraps up like the spring season. We've had some movies come out. Mario killed it in the box office. And while it wasn't a summer blockbuster, it made money like a summer blockbuster. And now we're starting to look into the future of the summer movies. And maybe the most anticipated movie is coming out in just a week. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Before we preview some of that movie, I'm curious, when you think of like summer blockbuster, what immediately what do you start to think of?
I think the first non-superhero summer blockbuster I think of is Independence Day.
Okay.
I think just from being a kid when that movie came out, I just remember everybody talking about it. It was like kind of the first thing that I thought about of like being a summer like blockbuster. You've got a big action star. You've got over the top set pieces, high adrenaline. It's a fun experience in the theater. A more modern version of that is obviously going to be like your Avengers movies.
Yep.
And then you move into last year you have Top Gun Maverick. So I think we've had several examples of what a good summer blockbuster can be, and I really am hopeful that Guardians lives up to that expectation.
So I think of movies like Jurassic Park.
Oh yeah,
that is just a spectacle. It's like you need to go see it in the theater. Summer blockbuster means like you gotta get your popcorn, you gotta take some friends. Don't think too much, but just go have fun. The best place to see this is in the movies. So like Jurassic Park, Terminator 2.
Oh yeah.
Those movies are just like over the top. They're ridiculous. Don't think too much about it, but they're impressive. And something about innovating or doing something new. Or like, I've never seen that. I remember the first Avatar. I was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like this before. And then later on, I've been like, oh, I've seen this story 10,000 times. I've seen this before, but it tricked me. That was a blockbuster. That was really cool. And I think we kind of talked a little bit about this in the car when we were driving home, that we're kind of in like a really interesting space for movies because we're not in the summer blockbuster movies, and movies, were shot during COVID. We're starting to get to movies now that maybe they were shot partially out of COVID.
Yeah.
There's a reason to go back to the movies. What do you think? Are we in like a movie renaissance, or what's going on?
It kind of feels that way. We were in really a low point for the last 2 years with, theaters were kind of shut down. Not a lot of things were coming out, and the quality overall, there was a few movies that came out in the last 2 years that I think we enjoyed, but for the most part, it was largely disappointing. Most of them were like made for streaming type movies. Nothing that like, you're going to think about 10 years from now for the most part, aside from like maybe the Batman, you have Top Gun Maverick, you have some of the big ones like Everything Everywhere All at Once. But everything after those movies is just largely forgettable. And I think so far this year, we've already seen a handful of movies we really enjoyed. I was texting Brett this week. There's like 5 movies in the theater right now that I wanted to see. And so for me, that's exciting. That's exciting that there's a reason to want to go out to see those movies. Not that there's nothing good that comes on streaming, but we've talked about, maybe it's just something in my head, but it's like when I see a movie that's come out straight to streaming, it's almost like when you used to see a made-for-TV movie. It's like, it's a movie, but it's not a real movie.
Yeah.
Unless it's in the theater, unless it came out in theaters, it's like a half movie.
Well, I remember being really excited about when HBO Max made their policy like if it's in theaters, it'll be online, and I was like, "Oh, this will be perfect." I love it. I'll see all the new movies. I can't remember how many of those movies I actually watched because I was like, "Oh, I'll just wait. I want to see it in theaters," or like, "Well, if it's available here, it sucks."
Yeah.
We watched Soul on Disney Plus when it was released, and I remember being like, "Oh, this is interesting," but then I was like, "Oh, it sucks." I watched Black Widow on Disney Plus. Not a great example of a good movie to see.
You're giving a lot of really good examples.
But
Wonder Woman was another one that like we all watched because they did.
I was so pumped.
Release,
I was so pumped to see it.
One was so good, and then it was like largely everybody was like spent 3 hours of their Christmas holiday sad.
See, so I think we're at an interesting place because, like, it's more fun to go to the movies. Yeah. It is we learned when we had Movie Pass. The movies are the best place to see the movie because that's the way the film was intended to be viewed. So Air, as a perfect example, you can watch this movie on your TV at the house and you're going to enjoy it, but something about the cinematography and the sound is not going to be the same. Seeing it on a screen bigger than your house changes the cinematography. It makes you appreciate the grandiose vision that the director and the cinematographers took. So I think we're at a really cool place where going to the movies is actually worth it. But I also am kind of curious of like, we've seen a lot of, okay. We haven't seen anything that I'm like, with the exception of Renfield, I haven't seen anything that I'm like, that was bad. I don't want to see that. But until Air, I haven't seen anything where I'm like, oh, I was really impressed by that. So it's like we're in the hall. We're not even in the hall of really good. We're in the hall of good. And I want to see, can a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 be that movie that kicks us back? We're back at the theaters. We got a good director, a good cast, known characters, and possibly a new storyline. What are you kind of expecting or hoping for out of Volume 3?
So I know you recently rewatched the first two. I plan to watch them before we go see it next week. I'm just kind of hoping for, fun dialogue, a story that progresses well. I generally like the stuff that James Gunn does, so I'm optimistic. Maybe not the same exact formula because, we've seen a gazillion Marvel movies now, and most everything after the first Guardians pretty much tried to adopt their formula of like a lot of comedy, witty comedy. So I hope that they change it up just a little bit, but I know for just a few things that I've seen interview-wise, several of the actors are saying this is their last kind of ride with.
Well, it's worth noting that, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more next week because we're hoping to do a Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 episode, but this was the movie that really, after Avengers, this is the movie that gets us on a cosmic trail. So if Iron Man was the first step on the road to the Avengers movie, Guardians of the Galaxy is the first step on the way to Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah.
This is where we get to meet Thanos. The Collector talks to us about the Infinity Stones in Volume 1. We are on a track now. We are on a collision course to battle with Thanos. And Infinity War and Endgame are just chef kiss movies. They're great movies. Guardians is a funny movie. It's really good. There's a formula there. James Gunn has this like very indelible thumbprint on the movie. I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
I think as far as like streaming suggestions, we talked about this before. If you need a streaming suggestion this week, go on Disney Plus and watch those two movies, and then go get a ticket to go see Volume 3. Even if you're over the MCU, you're like, hey, it ended after Endgame, you haven't liked some of the other stuff, this is going to probably be the conclusion of a story that started before Infinity War. So I feel pretty confident that James Gunn will land the plane, and whatever interesting or creative journey we're going to go on, it should be really fun.
Yeah, I think cohesively as like a Guardian story, it should wrap itself up in a way that we had hoped Ant-Man 3 would wrap up Ant-Man. And some of the other stories would be true to their previous narratives, where it has enough standalone story that you don't need to have watched like a gazillion Disney Plus shows and all these other movies to know why characters are where they're at.
Yep.
But they have that privilege because they're in outer space. We haven't been dealing with anything really in outer space yet with the Disney Plus MCU shows. Secret Invasion's going to come soon and get us out to space. I imagine. I haven't seen it, but I've seen pictures of Nicolas Cage in space. Or not Nicolas Cage. Nick Fury in space. So.
Nicolas Cage, Dracula up in space.
Yeah. Dracula. So I assume that'll be the first kind of in space-ish Disney Plus Marvel show. But I'm excited. I still get excited, even though I've been disappointed by several of the Phase 4 movies. We're moving into Phase 5 now. Hopefully we're getting a new swing. Like Brett said, all the stuff we're watching now is starting to be stuff that was filmed at the end of COVID and moving forward. So hopefully, as far as like themes go, we're starting to hopefully move past some of like the socio-political themes that we were dealing with of the more recent movies that have kind of turned off a lot of people to movies and TV shows as a whole, regardless of where you sit on the fence of any of those topics, just because people don't really like to be lectured at in their media. Having some subtle nuance is nice because it leaves it open to interpretation. It gives you enough space, I think, to think about these topics without it being like shoved, in your face and down your throat.
Well, so. Kevin Feige has said that their Marvel is looking for more experienced filmmakers, and James Gunn is obviously very familiar with making films. He's going to be the new Kevin Feige for the DCU, and it'll be curious next week when we're talking about this movie if we are saying that he landed the plane. He did it because, the Spider-Man trilogy really is not only the punctuation of an emphatic period on the MCU's trilogy, but also on trilogies or a pair of sequel movies from The Amazing Spider-Man, from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. It is just a conclusion of sorts to the Spider-Man Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if James Gunn's product speaks to what Kevin Feige said. Like, did Kevin Feige see this movie and was like, clearly we need more James Gunns. Instead of minions that'll be yes man, we need people that are willing to do things. And that's kind of ironic because it's kind of the theme of Air. Yeah. Is having leaders that have conviction and passion and willing to fight with it. And maybe Kevin Feige is feeling like Philip Knight or Ben Affleck's character in Air of like, all right, I've taken some losses, I've taken some lumps. I need to walk around and think about it.
Well, he's definitely got investors and over-the-top people breathing down his back right now.
Yeah, and so, a lot of maybe, there's a couple times in the movie Air where Sonny Vaccaro's like, remember just like you used to, just when you were selling shoes out of the trunk of your car. You remember that, Phil? You remember that? And he goes on his walk, and he's like, this feels like old Nike. This feels like the old days.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that maybe this movie will remind Kevin Feige and Marvel and all the bigwig execs there of like, this feels like the old days. This could be really cool. So I'm excited. My wife is super excited. Her favorite MCU movies are all the Guardians. She loves the characters, the originality. My wife and I, I'll post a video of it, but my wife and I actually did an awesome Star-Lord, Gamora, and Baby Groot costume when my first daughter was born. She was Baby Groot. Got the purple leather jacket, and she got all greened out. So that was a fun Halloween. But I'm hopeful for the movie. I'm excited.
Yeah, the first one was, for a lot of people, a big surprise. Nobody really, unless you're just a super like comic book fan, knew much about the Guardians, if anything. And it allowed for us to be kind of immersed in this. We know, just because we can see the news, Disney's making a lot of changes. There's a lot of moving parts. They haven't made a lot of money off of Phase 4. They've got a lot of screen time. They've got a lot of investment. And I don't know that they can afford for this movie to not be good.
Yep. And I think that is kind of a perfect place to leave it because there's so much to discuss around the MCU, around the movie, and where it lands will, I think, speak to some of the trajectory. We've got a lot of closing thoughts still lingering from Ant-Man 3, one of our very first episodes. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, go check it out. But I think it's time to pull in, to park it. Don't forget, our movie on the minivan promotion that we're doing. That's for the first 100 subscribers to our YouTube channel. Go on, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tell everybody you know to do it, because once we get to 100, we're doing that drawing for a $25 gift card to Fandango. Who knows? Rumor is maybe there's something else to give away, to give out. But we've got a lot of big ideas, and we're only going to share it with the first 100 people. So we're stoked to have you here.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts as we
no,
pull
if
into
you
the
guys
driveway?
have any streaming suggestions, any movies that you've watched recently that you just are super passionate about that you think that we should check out or maybe talk about, feel free to send us a message.
Yep.
Leave it in the comment section. We're definitely open to any suggestions as far as.
And also in the
suggestions.
comment sections, let us know what you thought about this, trying to do more of a grab bag style of the show instead of doing one exclusive movie, kind of focusing on a couple. It worked out well for us that we had the double feature.
Yep.
We had the Last Kingdom, and we've got the Guardians of the Galaxy looming ahead. But let us know what you thought of that. And aside from that, I guess we'll see you down the road.
Yeah.